Yep. Ready.
You're as left as you're going to get there.
Thank you. David?
Okay.
Yep. Do
Gallery view will let you show everybody.
Yep. There you go.
All right.
Yep. We hear you fine, Bill.
Thank you.
All right. Are we ready, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, we are.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Councilors, members of SLT, and Mr. Sheldon. See that we have, I see that we have quorum. So I will call this regular scheduled meeting on Tuesday, May 19th, 2020 to order. And the Madam Clerk has the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that the agenda for the May 19th, 2020 regular meeting of Council be adopted. You can call for any amendments.
Any motions or amendments to the agenda? Not seeing any. I will now call the vote. Madam Clerk will call the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Where are we? Right here. And next is a disclosure of pecuniary interest. After looking at the agenda and studying its contents, is there any member of council that wishes to declare a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Not seeing any, I ask the clerk to please take note of that. Now, hearing presentation delegations. So first we have the municipal update on COVID-19, and first up is the presentation by the Fire Chief, Chief Limburner. Chief, yep.
Mayor, council members, senior staff, and members of the public. I just had to clear the background noise there for a second. Yeah, so just to update what's going on. We're still meeting on a regular basis, the emergency control group, to discuss the ongoing situation. We are still in a declared emergency, and our EOC is in partial activation. In Niagara, as of today, we have 612 cases, 58 deaths, 442 recoveries, which is 72%, which is an excellent number. In Ontario, 22,957 cases, 1,904 deaths, 17,638 recovered, which is 77%, another excellent number. And in across Canada, we have just over 78,000 cases, and we're only at 50% recovery at this point. So the Niagara region and the province of Ontario are well ahead of the rest of the nation. Our case doubling days has gone down from the last time I reported to you. It's at 58 days now. The two main contributors to that is the testing of asymptomatic people. They've increased the testing range, so they're picking up more positive cases. And as the weather improves, which is really going to get nice in the next 4 or 5 days, it's going to increase the amount of community and close contact, which will make our numbers go up somewhat. As far as institutions, we have 10 outbreaks in those institutions. Cases are primarily are involved in the workers, 25 to 30, and 85-year plus, and those, like I said, are in institutions. Cases, 62% are close contact. Again, that's going to increase because of weather. 25% community spread and 12.5% travel. The unfortunate part is that our care facilities and retirement homes are contribute 81% of all deaths are in our institutions, which is very tragic. Municipalities that have declared, we're still at 247, and we have 71 First Nations. The province has extended the declaration into June 2nd, but they are into the first phase of recovery. And starting this past Saturday, they allowed golf courses to open with restrictions, marinas, private parks and campgrounds only to full season renters. They can't do daily or weekend rentals. We'll continue through bylaw and our emergency team to monitor that and work with these groups to make sure that they meet compliance. And starting today, retail was expanded to allow people in their stores if they have a street front entrance, but they have to meet some very strict guidelines to do so. All construction is allowed to resume, and regular medical services are put back into service. We've done two things. By law, we put a message out to across our website and on the town's message boards. If anybody is any businesses or people that are inquiring about whether they can or cannot open, they can do two things. They can go on to ontario.ca/COVID-19. There's an extensive list there, or they can call the bylaw department, and their number is posted on the website, and they can talk to a bylaw officer, and they can help answer some questions. As far as the town goes, we started to take all the barriers down at the parks today, so you can start using parks. The washrooms will remain closed until we can come up with a safe plan as far as cleaning and maintaining them. Public health recommends that we clean our public washrooms, all touch points within those facilities at least twice a day. So that creates a bit of a labor issue. So we just don't want to open the washrooms too early until we have the message addressed. So the emergency group has developed a recovery plan framework document. We just finalized it today. We will be distributing it to all of council tomorrow and putting it on our website and distributing amongst all our staff. And our recovery plan, as far as the working groups, we have 6 working groups that were established, and they've built some teams, and they're going to be working on procedures as far as recovery and opening up further activities within the town. And that's pretty well what I have. Do you have any questions?
I would like to just say, Bob, that again, sitting in the meeting this morning, and not just this morning, my last 1 or 2 meetings, it has been interesting to see that the EOC has gone from the safety of shutting, making sure facilities were shut down, and now you have had to switch over because of the opening up of facilities. And it's interesting to hear the process involved in opening them up and still following the safe government regulations. So it's not just a case of opening up some locks. You do have to, like you say, the washroom issue at twice a day has to be figured out as far as the tennis clubs, tennis courts in Fenwick and what have you. So it is it's interesting myself as somewhat of a bystander to hear how staff is tackling these problems and moving things on. Like you say, the next 4 or 5 days going to be great weather, so they will. There's my mic not being on. So they will be pressure to get out there and enjoy the weather. And like I say, it's great hearing how you guys are working at getting the facilities open and obviously staying within the guidelines. Thank you for that. Any other comments, questions from any of the councillors? Not seeing any.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have a motion presented by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from B. Limburner, Fire Chief and Community Emergency Management Coordinator, for information. If there is no discussion, I will call for the vote. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries.
And the next presentation will be by the Town Treasurer, Teresa Quinlan. Go ahead, Ms. Quinlan.
This presentation is on the COVID-19 financial impact forecast. You have the report in front of you. The area treasurers have been meeting on a weekly basis with the region. And what we have done is we've collected all the data and the impact of COVID-19 to the various municipalities, and the region wants to advocate on behalf of the 12 municipalities and the region for funding from the federal and provincial governments in order to provide relief for the COVID-19 pandemic effect of the town. So there are two reports here. There's Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. Appendix 1 talks about what the impact would be if things remain the same right now as far as being shut down to the end of June. And the second report talks about if things don't change until the end of the year. So you'll see the financial impact of that with regards to the lost revenues, the additions that are incurred for additional costs for cleaning and other costs that the town has incurred because of COVID. So until the end of June, the impact is about $409,000 additional cost to the town, either lost revenues or additional costs. And that's about a 2.7% equivalency to a tax levy increase. And to the end of the year, it's about $850,000. And that's over a 5% tax levy increase. When you look at this, there's different components that are impacting the town. One is the additional cost to the 2020 budget, and that's what these numbers represent. And then there's also a cash flow implication with regards to COVID. So for example, in the month of April, we weren't issuing any building permits. So we haven't received any revenues for the development charge revenues, and that impacts our cash flow. So right now we are projecting that the way the impact of the permits being delayed by a month and construction picking up again, we'll probably have about a 25% reduction in revenue in the development charges. That's an important number because part of the revenue that we receive from development charges pays for the principal and interest on the Meridian Community Center, on one of the debts that we have, which is about $1.5 million. So if we don't receive that money in year through the in-year revenues, then we're going to have to draw on our reserve. Our reserve for the development charges right now, we have $1.7 million. So we would be able to cover this year's shortfall. It's something we just have to keep an eye on. So with regards to capital projects, one of the things that we did look at was to say, you know, what capital projects can we actually defer so that we can free up some cash? And in talking to the senior team and the director of public works, there are two projects right now that we're looking to defer to 2021, and that is the Sulphur Springs project. That project, we're looking at going out for tender and doing design build and starting off the design of that, but the actual construction would be done in 2021. And the other one is Foss Road. There are two projects there. One relates to the road and one relates to the sanitary. And that project is also being delayed to 2021. So that would save about $1.5 million of cash. So that would actually help our cash flow. As you recall, council also approved for the town to increase our line of credit. So currently right now we have $11 million of a line of credit in case we need it. Right now, as of today, we are not using the line of credit, but in case we do have it. So that's another security that the town does have. So that with regards to the 2021 budget, can COVID actually impact the 2021 budget? It can. If we don't receive any relief funding from the federal or provincial government for the $409,000 of shortfall of additional costs relating to COVID by the end of June, then we don't have a stabilization reserve to cover that. So then this would be added to the 2021 tax levy. So then off the top, when we start the 2021 budget, we're going to have to find those funds that we're short right now. So that's the impact that it could have to the 2021. So if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you, Madam Treasurer. Any questions from any councillors? I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 questions for the treasurer. Thank you for the excellent review and very detailed report. And I want to ask you these 3 questions with regards to, the first question has to do with Appendix 1 and 2. I see the excellent contributions every department has made, but I see no contribution by the library. Is this a fact that they are projecting no savings?
That's correct. There isn't anything in this report. That's correct.
No savings from the library. Thank you. Question number 2. With government assistance, council, your projections are showing we're either going to be 2.7% short or 5.7% short, which is an impact on residential taxes. Do either of these numbers include the impact of additional funds approved but not budgeted for?
No, they don't. This is just COVID-related expenses only.
So the other $200,000+ we've already approved is not included in that percentage.
You are correct.
So that'll make another significant mark on the taxes of almost 2%.
Yes.
Okay, my third question is, I agree with the municipalities working together with the region to apply for assistance for the COVID-19. On May the 8th, we received the letter from the region and regional council report detailing their impact of 18.6 and funding of 6.5 with virtually a $12 million impact of COVID. The region doesn't really spell out that they're going to consolidate a statement with all the municipalities, but I think you explained that the treasurers have gotten together and are providing that information to the region.
Well, actually, it's been approved by regional council. So this is what the motion is for this report. So regional council is asking all of the 12 municipalities to be supportive of having one voice going to the federal and provincial governments. So the regional council is supporting this, the CAO is supporting it, and the treasurers are providing the financial information.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I've not seen one. Wait a minute. So not seeing one. I have one for the Director of Public Works. The work that we will not be doing on Foss Road, obviously the road and the infrastructure, but the infrastructure, is that more or less to prepare the town for the expansion in East Fenwick, so that by putting that off, we're not impeding any flows right now? Would that be correct, Director?
You, Mr. Mayor. So the Foss Road project is a sanitary sewer expansion project, basically upsizing that sewer. So it is that project isn't to service the developments that are going to be happening in Fenwick with related to the expansion projects down the road. These are specifically related to projects that are already on the books. So developments that are already in the process of being approved, or have been approved and are waiting site plan approval. I believe there's 3 or 4 developments that are going to be feeding into the sanitary sewer, and that's what is going to be supported by this infrastructure. Okay. The Director of Planning may have some more information with respect to those exact developments, but it's not for the East Vaughan Hill expansion. It's for developments that are already in process of being approved.
Okay. So I guess the question then goes to you, Director of Planning. By putting off this this infrastructure on Foss Road, are we opening the road or opening the door to any immediate problems in that part of the town, or are we going to be fairly safe in doing this on one more year down the road?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there are, I believe, 3 projects that are of significance in the Fenwick area that require the upsizing of the sanitary sewer. One is the Oak Haven subdivision. So that has draft plan approval status, and they're actually going to be coming to council and asking for an extension of their draft plan because they're still working out other issues with respect to that subdivision, and one is the need for a new pumping station. So that project isn't imminent at the moment. They're still dealing with a lot of the engineering design issues in that development. The next one is Baxter Hall, and that one does have site plan approval. And we've had some discussions with the architect who's working on that file in terms of doing the detailed building plans for a building permit. And he's indicated that his best guess at this time for when the owners would be in a position to file a building permit application for Baxter Hall will likely be late fall or spring next year. And that's probably a year's worth of construction before it's occupied. So that delaying the Foss Road sanitary sewer project by a year is not going to be impacting this development, but it can't be delayed past a year, that's for sure. The next one is a application for site plan at the former fire hall site in Fenwick. And the developer there has indicated to us that he will be hoping to bring his site plan into council for final approval. That's likely going to be the end of this summer or early spring, or pardon me, September, early fall. But he likely is also not going to start construction of that development until next year. So the delay is not going to significantly impact any of those developments that are kind of in process or have been approved, but we cannot delay it more than a year.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Any other questions on the financial report? If not, I'll have the clerk read the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a motion by Councillor Stewart and seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. It's fairly lengthy. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0074, Corporate Services. And whereas during this time of pandemic, Pelham residents and businesses expect all levels of government to work in close cooperation to help communities overcome the effects of the pandemic. And whereas the federal and provincial governments depend on municipalities delivering accurate, reliable data and projections on the financial impacts of COVID-19 has on communities to effectively distribute appropriate programs and funding. And whereas it is anticipated that the coronavirus pandemic will have long-term adverse effects on local and regional services, businesses, residents, and the local economy in general. And whereas funding and program support from the federal and provincial governments will be vital to the social health and economic recovery of the entire Niagara region. And whereas a single holistic view on the region's challenging economic situation and the financial difficulties confronting its municipalities will provide stronger justification for support. And whereas successful advocacy for government supports will require a united, consistent approach that involves cooperation among the region and all 12 local area municipalities, and alignment with municipal stakeholder groups such as the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Therefore, now be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0074 Corporate Services and formally endorse motions that support the collaboration between all of Niagara's communities and the Niagara region to submit one request to the federal and provincial governments for relief funding of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the town of Pelham. If there are no further questions on the motion, seeing none, I will call the vote. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. And the final COVID-19 general outlook on the corporation provided by our CAO, Mr. Cribbs. Mr. Cribbs, you're on.
Jason.
I'm sorry? I didn't have one.
You, Mr. Mayor.
Through Mr. Mayor.
I'll start the conversation.
Mr. Marr starts.
Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Director of Public Works.
It's a tag team here. So,
Okay.
So Mr. Mayor, members of council, senior management, and members of the public. Just going to give you a little update from Public Works perspective on how COVID-19 has affected our department and how we're handling that, things we've done to be able to be productive and work through this pandemic. First, I'd like to just say, I'm very happy and pleased with the response that we've got from staff in Public Works. We've got a lot of support from our team members, and they're doing an excellent job in providing the services to the residents in the town of Pelham, even under a pandemic, which is really nice to see. Some of the things that we have done in Public Works, I know I've reported on this before, to protect our workers and be as productive as possible. We've gone to some split shifts for our Public Works guys. So you may see people, public residents may see work trucks out on Saturdays. So in order to provide separation and physical distancing, we basically split the crews and are running 2 shifts. We run Monday through Saturday. Sundays, no work. But in order to try to spread out the employees and be able to provide vehicles for everybody to access and safely use, we've gone to that split shift, which seems to be working very well. Again, one of the policies that we put in place was a 1 truck, 1 person. So we've been able to, a couple of things we've been able to do is we've been able to assign 1 truck for 1 employee. They're responsible for that truck on their shift. Nobody else touches it. They clean it and maintain it. With our park staff, some of our park staff, we've implemented drive directly to the site, and they're able, by storing equipment on site and making it available, we're able to start our day and end our day directly at the work site, and limiting the amount of exposure and time they have by coming into the Tice Road Operations Center, which has helped out enormously as well. In our facilities, we've increased our level of cleaning and efforts. And we're even going as far now to look at installing some additional plastic barriers inside of our vehicles, which will allow us to move towards a 2-person and 1 truck scenario when we start to, if and when we start to have additional employees join the team. With the parks, Chief Limburger commented on that. The parks are now opened, and as Chief Limburger stated, the washrooms still remain closed at this point in time until we can have a plan in place and have a staffing level to be able to support being able to clean those facilities and keep them safe. One thing I do want to mention is that the playground equipment is still closed to the public. The playground equipment is not being cleaned. So as of this point, they're still being closed. So I really wanted to focus on a discussion on with respect to beautification, our beautification department. The town of Pelham is blessed by having a number of planters and beds throughout the town. Pelham is a beautiful town. We take pride in that. And as reported earlier, right now our beautification staff are running at about 70% capacity and also on split shifts. So one thing we have committed to is providing hanging baskets throughout the downtown business areas in both Fenwick and Fawn Hill. So that was a cost that we had incurred early in the process. That planting material is purchased. They are being planted, and we intend to install those hanging baskets in the downtown business areas of Fawn Hill and Fenwick. And we can carry that out with our current staffing levels and the level of service we're currently providing under the pandemic conditions. We also have 17 beds throughout the town of Pelham. 9 of those planting beds are basically planted with annual plants and require a lot of maintenance, the planting, the maintenance, and a lot of watering. There are also 8 beds within the town that are perennials without the annuals. So again, a little bit less maintenance on those, but these are all things that we have to maintain and keep up. Under our current level of service that we presented in previous council reports, we're basically providing minimum level of service with respect to those beds at this point, which will be mulching if required and weeding so that they don't get overrun with weeds. At this point in time, there's no intention to plant those planters unless it was council's wish to move ahead with such a task. Obviously, that would result in additional costs for materials as well as additional staff required to be able to maintain and keep those beds going throughout the summer months. In addition to that, under a grant that we received last year, the town has purchased 28 large self-watering type planters that were going to be installed in the downtown business areas in Fawn Hill and Fenwick. Again, with our current staffing levels, those are not able to be serviced with what we have in place at this point. So if we were going to move forward with planting those self-watering planters, then there would be additional staffing resources required, as well as cost with respect to the material for those planters themselves. That's about all I had with the beautification. You'll notice that summer grass is getting a little bit longer, especially now with the wet weather we've had and the warm temperatures that are coming. We expect the grass to start growing. And as stated in our previous reports to council, that the minimum level of service, we basically have gone to, instead of maintaining a 3-inch cut, we've gone to a 6-inch cut. So some of the parks and green spaces, you will see that there'll be a little bit longer grass, but again, trying to keep things as sufficient as possible. And with our reduced staffing levels, that's the level of service that we're able to keep up with. Finally, before I sign off, I wanted to mention something about the gypsy moth. So public works staff are hard at work in getting this program off the ground. We've done extensive public outreach through media, through our social media sites, our website, advertised and published in papers. And I think the original last report I brought to council was that we were looking at somewhere around May 20th would be the first spray. I can report that with some of the cold weather we've had, that that has been delayed slightly. Our consultant Bioforest, they are on site. They were here today. They'll be on site tomorrow. Taking a look at 2 things: the emergence of the egg masses, the hatch. We're looking for approximately 90% hatch when we do our first spray. But what really is kind of held us up is the cold weather has delayed the emergence of leaves. So without leaves, the caterpillars don't eat, and you need the leaves to be out to be able to contact the spray, and the caterpillars will eat that. So I'm hoping to get an answer back today, or well, probably not today, tomorrow now, with respect to when that first spray date will happen. And we'll make sure that we post that through our social media sites and our website to get that information out to the public so that they know when that first spray is going to happen. So with that, I'll turn it over to our CAO.
Mr. CAO?
Well, I think before I introduce my own topics or my own analysis, perhaps this is a good time for council to ask questions, if it has any, for Mr. Marr.
Yes, excellent idea. So I have one to the director. Wouldn't the cost of the planters and what have you, wouldn't that have been covered in the budget that we passed last October, November? And I realize that we're now into a pandemic situation and we have laid off staff. But could you answer that question as to wouldn't those costs that you mentioned, wouldn't they have been covered in the budget that we had back in October, November?
Hey, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. So I'm not saying that there would be additional costs above and beyond what was approved as part of our 2020 operating budget and capital budget. This is basically just with respect to the hanging baskets, the 70 hanging baskets that we have through the town. We had purchased those plants early. We haven't made additional purchases for the other beds in town, as well as the self-watering baskets that would be installed in DBAs. So there's money in the budget to cover those costs. It's just the fact that now we're in a pandemic and reduced staffing levels. In order to move forward with the implementation of those plantings, we will need to have additional resources to do that with respect to labor. But the material costs, yes, they would have been accounted for in the 2020 budget.
Yeah. And then also the other question with the grasses in the park. Now that the parks, I can appreciate the fact that if we saved money on eliminating one or two cuts, but now that the parks will be opened again, obviously I think it's only fitting, especially with the tick season upon us. The longer the grass, the more ticks. So I think it's only good sense or good husbandry of the parks, or however you want to call it, that would be more or less to the citizens. We should be going back to a 3-inch cut. Would that be a correct assumption? If you could answer that, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, during this course of this pandemic, the idea was to try to reduce our level of service. With an increased level of service comes additional resources with regards to staff that are required. So, as you know, we've ended up reducing the amount of seasonal staff that we usually bring in. And with that, we've also repurposed and redeployed staff that are with the town currently into public works to kind of fill some of those holes. So we can definitely go to a 3-inch cut, but with our current staff levels that we have in place, we will have to bring in some of those seasonal staff to assist us with that, to keep up on those level of service.
Okay, yeah, I've asked enough questions. I'm sure there's other questions. Yes, Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mayor. So I would like to propose an alternative idea to the town purchasing and planting flower beds this season. If town staff could organize a flower bed sponsorship and competition, it would engage citizens during this unprecedented time and also help to beautify the town. Called Hope Grows or something of the like, the town can select prominent flower beds such as Peace Park, Centennial Park, and some of the other prominent beds. And organizations or families can purchase locally grown Pelham plants to design, plant, and maintain their town flower bed. Town staff can ensure that signage identifies each sponsor in each flower bed and can help promote Hope Grows flower bed competition on the town website, where residents can select their favorite flower bed and the winner can be announced sometime around or after Labor Day, for instance. I would think probably about a $5,000 budget for the sponsor plaque or signage that would be posted in each of the gardens or the beds. And then of course for prizing. So I would think about 5,000 would be required. And then prizing could then include gift certificates from local Pelham businesses. So for me, this seems like a solid alternative, and I'd like to hear, I guess, some of the other council just think.
Any reply? Any questions? Councillor Wink, I see you want to reply.
Yeah. Do you know what? I applaud your initiative, Councillor Hahn. You know, I was driving through the town this past weekend and noticed a lot of flower beds with tulips in there and how great it looks. And actually, I think the flowers give joy to people right now, and we need every little bit we can get through this. So I understand the cost issue that Mr. Marr was saying, but I support Councillor Hahn's suggestion that we farm it out to the community. A lot of people have time that they take care of the gardens, and that I think it's a great compromise under the circumstances. So,
Any, see Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with both my other councillors as well. And the only other area is I think we should be selective on where we specifically have these flower beds. Because I know right beside my house, basically at the end of Edward, we have a small flower bed that's traditionally planted with petunias. I'm not so sure that those kind of flower beds are necessary, and I'm sure the Director of Public Works has a list of all of them. But I agree, competition of the major areas where people see it, where you're seeing tulips right now, I think it's a great outlook, and it's a great thing. And there's many people that have a lot of time right now. And I've even talked to Groller the other day to see what his idea was, and he was actually thinking of doing something at Peace Park for the town. He just hadn't had time to talk to anybody. So he's a local grower. He has these plants, and he was thinking, so maybe if we open up the door to these growers, they have excess plants because they've not been able to market them. And I think it's an excellent idea, and it's a good all-around project for the people of the town to get involved.
So just so I understand this, so Councillor Hahn, your idea, your suggestion is to have private citizens work in town flower beds. Is that correct? Planting them.
So it would be a sponsorship, yeah, and it would result in a competition at the end, so people would vote on them. So, I mean, a lot of municipalities do something like this with Christmas lights, whoever has the nicest Christmas lights, and, you know, they choose that, or gardens, whoever has the nicest personal gardens at their home. But in this case, I'm thinking of using these town flower beds, and I think that Mr. Marr, I think, said 8 or 9 prominent beds. I think that was the number he used. But regardless, you select the prominent ones, like the Centennial Parks and the Peace Parks, and, you know, the one at 20 and Station, the ones that are highly visible. I think that during COVID, I think that this would be an opportunity to, yes, we have people that have more time on their hands than perhaps they would usually have. B, it helps beautify the town, which gives people hope. I mean, it does look when things look nice and it picks your spirits up. I think it's kind of a win-win. So yes, people would sponsor a bed, and they would get their name, whether it's an organization, a business, or whether it's a series of, maybe it's a couple families want to get together and do it. Individuals can do it. And they would have a plaque, so it would say, you know, brought to this bed is sponsored by ABC Company, or this Smith and Jones family, who knows? But that there would be some prizing and a very small budget to be put against it, and it could go into the end of the season, which would be, you know, Labor Day or sometime in September, usually when the growing season's finished. And this way, at the same time, if they're buying plants from local growers, we're also helping local growers, so it's helping their economics as well. So it's kind of a win-win.
Okay, so now I want to ask the CAO, what is the town liability of having private citizens planting public flower beds?
Well, Your Worship, that's a question I'm capable of answering, but it's better off that I answer that in closed session. Certainly, there's a way we can support this happening.
Okay.
If that's good enough for a public answer, if not, then I suggest someone bring a motion, we go in closed.
Sure. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It goes kind of along with the Adopt a Road program where church groups and, classrooms and that, clean up the roadsides. I think it's a great initiative.
Okay. My only drawback to this is, number one, this is probably an initiative that we probably should have done back in February or March, as in right now we're in the planting season. So we will have to definitely get the word out pretty soon, and then what have you. My own preference would have been to just go ahead. We have the budget for the plants. We called back one or two workers that we're probably going to have to do the 3-inch cut that I don't think people, once they start walking through our parks and get loaded up with ticks, they're not going to be very happy with a 6-inch cut. I don't blame them. We're going to have to go to a 3-inch cut anyway. And when you think of it, the money we're talking is $3 a household, which probably would have been cheaper than to have them go out and plant their own flower beds. To have them plant our flower beds, if I remember the correct cost was $21,000 for the plants. But whatever the wish of council is. Councillor Hurlbert, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just like to remind council and staff, this isn't the first time we've had someone do a flower bed. I remember last year that in Fenwick, we had one of the florists or developers, not a developer, one of the greenhouse operators come in and take over and spruce up the flower bed in Fenwick, if that's correct. So this isn't the first time we've had private individuals come in and do that kind of work.
No, but again, I will point out that those talks started back in January or February. It didn't start in the middle of May, that's all. But whatever, let's, it's a great idea, whether we put it out there and see the reaction. Councillor Stewart.
Yes, the gardens in Fenwick were looked after by John Langendone from Willowbrook Greenhouses.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Mr. CAO.
In the event it's the will of council to proceed with suggestion as outlined by Councillor Hahn, I would suggest then that the mechanism, the manner in which we go forward, is that the manner be authority for the program be delegated to town staff. We can advertise, encourage. We're probably talking about 9 beds. Since there are 9 with annuals, there are 8 with perennials, and I think the 8 with perennials, that's not really the basis for a competition, or there are already plants in those. So that would be up to town staff to continue to at least weed, as Mr. Amar had indicated. So you're talking about 9 potential competition spots. That's certainly something a size we could handle. I would think because of as the mayor has stated, we're after Mother's Day. Like, this is the time to plant is now. It's not 4 weeks from now. So we'd have to start moving on this tomorrow. In fact, we'd have to start putting some staff on, throwing something together. But I think for June 1st, we could bring back, we could give you an update on what we have successfully done at that point. And I would imagine by June 1st, i.e. 2 weeks today, I would be surprised if we couldn't get 9 groups out of the town of Pelham who have some gardening skill and moxie to want to throw down and compete with each other. I'll be stunned if we don't have 9. I bet there are a number of people watching this right now thinking, I'd like a crack at that. So I would simply suggest deferring to the motion include a number. Councillor Hahn suggested 5,000. I have no reason to suggest that is not. I think that would be more than ample. And then to simply allow us to go forward with a way to allow people to register, much as was pointed out, is done with the highways and cleaning up alongside provincial highways is done all the time, and require require people to agree to undertake to maintain them until Labor Day. So for the duration of the summer, it would be contingent on that, on promising to actually keep them up until then, and we could pick a judging day somewhere in August. I think this is a doable plan, if it's the will of council.
Director of Public Works, Mr. Moore.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to echo the comments from CAO, the actual purchase and planting of the plants initially is a relatively minor cost. So one thing that has to be considered is the upkeep and maintenance and the watering of the actual bed. So that's just something for council to consider.
Yep. Thank you. I guess we'll. I guess the thing move forward. Let's see the kind of response we get. But then I guess it's going to have to be. I mean, I can't see people carrying pails of water to these beds. But what do I know? Okay, I guess we'll. It seems like this plan, like I say, is about a month too late. But we got to start somewhere. So let's see what we get back on June 1st, and we'll go from there, I guess. Is that anybody else have any other suggestions for this?
So, Mr. Mayor, we'll take that as a motion by Councillor Hahn to direct staff to investigate the feasibility of a volunteer competition. I'll come up with the wording.
Feasibility.
Well,
Madam Clerk, may I suggest that we be directed to attempt to offer the 9 beds and see, and if people say yes, then to go forward with it. My vision is on June 1st, us reporting what that this thing's underway, and if we don't have interest by June 1st, we've missed the planning time anyway, and the decision's sort of been made for us by apathy.
So I have a motion by Councillor Hahn. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Mayor, who do you wish to second? They all put their hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. See the seconder again, please. Councillor Wink.
So with no further discussion, I'll call the question on the motion. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
No.
The motion carries.
Okay.
So now you're on to the CAO's component
yes.
of the COVID report.
Yep. Sorry, Mr. CAO, we're now waiting for you. Oh,
You were, Councillor Wink.
Yeah, so just point of order, the mayor put forth a suggestion to do more frequent grass cutting on public lands to 3 inches. So I think we've got to have a motion to either support or defend that.
Madam Clerk, is that your take on it?
So if there is such a motion, that would be by Councillor Wink. Do we have a seconder? And then you may want, so if once the motion is on, you may want to hear from the director on how that might be achieved.
Okay.
I think the CAA wanted to speak there.
If I may be so bold, you may or may not feel you've exhausted that topic. There is a labor component to that, and we are going in closed session later this evening to discuss labor implications for the corporation as a result of COVID-19. I would suggest that that falls fully within that component. It was our full intention to discuss that. So perhaps this council may continue to discuss around whether you're generally supportive of us accomplishing a 3-inch trim level service standard, or 6, and then we can take directions from you and close vis-a-vis the labor implications of that, and or report out of the closed session if necessary, depending on how that works. I won't presume your discussions or where they go, but I think we're all rescheduled to talk about the cost implication and number of decisions and the implications of those decisions. So perhaps it would be good for you to publicly, because the public component would be a service standard, and then there's labor implications we'll deal with in a few hours, I would submit.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any other comments then from councillors on the implications or on the implications of a 3-inch cut as opposed to a 6-inch cut? Any discussion on that? Councillor Wink?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with the comments you made about the grass getting to 6 inches and concern over ticks. Now all of a sudden we're putting people, we're exposing people to potential Lyme disease and everything else. So I understand what you're saying. Perhaps there's something between 3 and 6 inches that we can saw off on, but I agree that we shouldn't be cutting at 6, whether it's 3 inches or 4 inches, that's fine, but I support what you're saying.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comment? Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mayor, to the Director of Public Works. Just so I'm clear, so the areas that were B6, so we're talking all the parks, like the actual playing fields, the areas where children are going to be playing, or what specific areas are going to be left at 6?
Hey, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that's correct. It'll be all the green space areas, including our cemeteries. So we've basically gone from cutting once per week to once every 2 weeks. And our line trimming, we completed before once a week. Now that's been basically brought to once every 2 weeks as well.
So,
Councillor, I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to perhaps identify which particular parks, which areas could perhaps have a shorter length versus the 6-inch trim. So for instance, an area where children are going to be using equipment and playing, I would agree it needs to be shorter because of ticks. An area that is not as prominently used, perhaps it could be longer. Maybe there's areas that you can, help me to understand which areas would fall under the, need to be addressed for the shorter trim.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's a good point. Definitely we can prioritize and have a higher frequency of cuts for certain properties. That would be something we could definitely look at. I would like to speak with my manager of Public Works and supervisor of beautification to come up with a list of prioritized pieces of property for sure, and bring that back to council.
Yeah, I would support that.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make a comment. I know that in my area, I live right by a park, and I know the machines there are cutting closer than I cut in my own yard, which is 2 inches. So those machines are already set at 1 or 2 inches. So I know at Harold Black Park, when you look at the flooded area and the baseball diamonds, that definitely is 6. It seems to me the areas around the playgrounds right now, which you're using smaller machines on, they're not set for 6. They're achieving a cut equivalent to what I do on my own yard. So I agree. Possibly you could take a look and discuss with your staff and come back and report to us.
Well, if I even just mention that I get lots of questions in the wintertime about people talking about some areas seem to get more plowing than they are. I can't help but wonder that if people start seeing one park getting more cutting than their park, I think it's going to open a whole new can of worms. Myself, I think we've either got to do the whole town one direction or one length, because we will get swamped in calls if we start selecting one park and letting other ones go. I know that for a fact.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. CAO?
I agree with your assessment, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Then we will leave this conversation until we go in closed session, and then we can discuss the financial implications. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
So we're now to the CAO's
Oh,
component?
I'm sorry. Now we're back to, sorry, Mr. Krebs, we're back to your presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. There were 5 things I think I wanted to touch on to provide you an update with as far as COVID-19 and its impact on the corporation of the town of Pelham over the last weeks. Firstly, next week we will be again holding an all-staff meeting using this technology platform. We held one last week that, or just over a week ago, that we thought quite successful, and we mean to keep doing that again to keep our communication lines open, and that it's relevant and appropriate as we start transitioning our thought process to looking towards reopening. With respect to our corporate looking at reopening, we have created 6 internal teams. Those teams are tasked with, sorry, give me a second. I wanted to give you the exact natures of their tasks. We have 6 teams. They're each is led by a member of SLT, and they're looking at preparing our buildings for reentry. Preparing our workforce, controlling access, creating social distancing plans, dealing with touch points and cleaning, and communication. So each member of SLT has formed, or by tomorrow will have formed their teams, and there are people from across the corporation, all levels of staff, who are working and focusing on these different areas that are collectively and conjunctively going to form our reopening plan. So we have people specializing in different areas to sort of make it manageable, and also it really reflects the fact that that looks kind of different out in Public Works and at Tice Road than it might at Town Hall than it does at the MCC. So we've tried to involve we are trying to involve as many staff members as we possibly can to ensure that people's voices are heard, but also that there's no limit on good ideas. Of course, no one's got the market cornered on that. And we have these 6 teams going forth. We'll probably continue to report to you on their developments, but at the moment we sort of form the teams, given them focuses and duties. And in the weeks to come, they'll be bringing back specific plans, and we'll be turning them into action items and actually making it happen as we reopen. So progress there. Of considerable significance, earlier today, the province announced, of course, schools won't reopen until the fall, but the type of camps that the town of Pelham offers will be allowed to proceed. That's significant for this corporation, but more importantly, it's significant for this community. We've only had a couple of hours here, so I'm not in a position where I can publicly make definitive promises, and a component of this is a labor issue, and we will discuss later this evening. That being said, what we can say is we now know that we're going to be, at least legally, we're allowed to offer camps. And the RCW runs a number of camps, some at the pool and some at the MCC, of course. And we have a waiting list. So they're very well taken up. And that's a waiting list based on the historic number of people, of campers relative to staff members. It's very clear that those staffing ratios would have to change, and that will form a portion of our discussion later this evening. So there's only so far we can come, and we've had this for 3 hours. So we're premature now, but we certainly welcome commentary if you have any. We don't have to get into the labor specific parts, but whether ultimately a decision has to be made as to whether the town wishes to try to increase the number of camps it wants to offer, whether it's going to decide it can offer those camps. If it offers camps at a reduced rate, obviously that has a financial implication, and we have to. But I would submit to you that there are a large number of families in this community that rely on those for not just for positive social opportunities for the children, but as a pragmatic matter so that the parents can go back to work. Camps fill a part of the role that the school system plays. School system's about education, but it's also about childcare. And we're about recreation and entertainment and positive growth, but we're also about childcare when we offer those services. So good news is legally we're able to go forward. That does have some implications on how we do. And Ms. Van Ravensway, I know we'll have some things to say to you. And we've only had a few hours with this, but we are excited at least the theoretical prospect. And we'll be happy to receive guidance both in principle and then specifically on how we execute that. So that's a major item. Both Ms. Van Ravensway and I are happy to take some questions, keeping in mind some part of this will be discussed and closed, and some we just don't know yet, but certainly invite questions there. And if there aren't questions that are just statements of principle that you might want to give us that could help guide how we approach this, we'd certainly appreciate that. The public washrooms, I need to reiterate, essentially we have a choice, not opening them or opening them and requiring staffing that was not contemplated when we created the budget for this year. They simply have to be cleaned at least twice a day to meet the public health guidelines, and that is not something we're currently staffed for. So admittedly, the discussion can partially happened in camera, but that is fundamentally the decision before us, not open them, or if we're going to open them, then we have to clean them properly, and frankly, we need some money for that. So I want to be abundantly clear on that point. And lastly, we make, council approves the meeting schedules late in December for the following year. We did that last year in December, and you approved what I thought was a very appropriate, based on our advice to you, a very appropriate meeting schedule that we were highly supportive of. And now, in light of coronavirus, I'm not sure that it suits the corporate needs any further. Specifically, as we stand, we have one meeting in the month of July and we have one meeting in the month of August. I would submit to you that we're going to continue to have a number of important decisions, and I think it's very hard to only meet twice in the span of 8 weeks or 9 weeks, depending on how you count that, for guidance and oversight, frankly. So it's certainly my recommendation to you that you consider at least one more meeting, if not 2 more meetings over the summer. I can inform council that August 10th is a date. Right now, you're only scheduled to meet in the last week of August. So that means that 3 weeks prior, there will be no meetings. August 10th, we have in our corporate calendar as a potential date for public meetings under the Planning Act. I can't tell council whether or not we're going to have any public meetings in the Planning Act on August 10th. I don't know whether we'll have the workflow there or whether we'll have adequately addressed the communications needs, whether those be through Zoom, etc. We're fairly close on a technical solution, but right now I can't say that you're going to have a public meeting in August 10th. I can say that that's an evening you've conceptually set aside to possibly attend, have a meeting and do work on behalf of the corporation that night. So that would be a reasonable time to add a regular meeting of council to that agenda, or as a separate agenda, but at any rate on that date. Similarly, in July, you're not scheduled to meet until the last week of July. So we'll actually go 4 whole weeks without meeting unless that changes. And I would submit to you, you can look at July 6th or July 13th. July 13th is scheduled as a placeholder for public meetings and Planning Act again. So in abstract theory, you're already conceptually sort of open to working that evening. That would be, either of those would be valid meeting times. Do we need 2 extra? I don't know if I can say that, but I certainly think it's prudent. But we certainly need at least 1 extra. And if you're only going to pick 1 extra, then I would strongly endorse July, because we may have some work from the Cannabis Control Committee coming due right around then, and we don't have a meeting in early July to accommodate that. So that's certainly a good one out of an abundance of caution. So to reiterate, August or July 6th or 13th, if you're so inclined to pick another date in July, and August 10th, if you're so inclined to pick a date for August. I would bring this up now because we should provide the public with as much notice as we possibly can, and only council can change its meeting schedule. So to that end, I leave that for your consideration and welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions to the CAO on any of the topics covered? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with the CAO. Being new on the Cannabis Committee, I know how much work they have ahead of them, and I know how complicated the issue is. And I would definitely support another council meeting in July and one in August, whether it's July the 6th or the 13th, either one works. August 10th is another date I think we should plan on, because this CCC committee and the town and the region are all involved in this, in the regulations, and we're never quite sure exactly where we're going to end up after every meeting. From my perspective, I'm just new, so just one of those guys that's on the trying to learn where we're going, and I certainly wouldn't want to not achieve the goal because we didn't have a meeting scheduled. So my vote is to have 2 extra meetings.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stewart.
As much as I, was well satisfied with the meeting schedule we put into place, we had no idea what we would be up against this year. So I agree with Councillor Hildebrand that it is likely that we will need the 2 meetings.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wink.
I concur with both Councillor Hildebrand and Stewart. We've got a lot of work to do. Staff have a lot of work to do that they need direction on. Quite frankly, I'm not going anywhere July and August, so I've got the time. So I wholly support it.
Okay. We do need a motion to put forward this. Councillor Wink, will you put forward that motion?
Absolutely.
Okay. And do we have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Hahn. And Councillor Hahn, you didn't have your hand up. Did you wish to speak to this?
Only to say that I support the idea of having 2 meetings. I think that's important, and especially before the original expiring date for the interim control bylaw. I think it's important that we have another meeting. So the 13th or the 6th, it doesn't matter, but I think that's very important.
Okay, thank you. Have you got a motion for us, Madam Clerk?
If you want to give me the date for July, I'll include it in the motion. I have August 10th as the meeting date for August. So what is the preference of council for the 6th or 13th?
I believe we went for the 13th. Am I right there, Council?
I heard both dates.
Oh, the 13th, maybe a show of hands, perhaps?
So the mover, 13th, okay. So
okay, thank you.
This is a motion to add a regular meeting of council on July 13th and August 10th.
Okay. Any further discussion on this motion? If not, the clerk will call the vote.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
and Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries.
So another question, Mr. Cribbs, and perhaps this is for the closed session. A lot of industries, and I imagine a lot of municipalities, after this work-at-home session forced on us or on them by the pandemic, do you, and the more I think about it, the more I guess this is a closed session question, but will the town, do you foresee going ahead, be encouraging more work at home if the job is suitable for it? I wonder if you had an opinion on that, please.
I can tell you that last calendar year, I had my first ever experience with doing some work from home. I mean, beyond taking a file home or two, but I mean, just being paid to work from my domicile. And that really opened up my eyes to the fact that, at least for the type of employment I normally seek, significant components of it can be done from one's home. So, and frankly, there are lessons for all of our society to take from this pandemic, and one is how we approach work. You're right, most of this answer needs to be in closed session, but I think every employer worth its salt is going to do some serious introspection and look at what did and did not work. And certainly some portions of our corporation are functioning extremely well, where the staff members are performing some tasks or the majority of their tasks from home.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Any other questions, comments on either Public Works or the CAO's report? Okay, not seeing any.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council received the COVID-19 update presentation from David Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer, and Jason Marr, Director of Public Works, for information. If there are no further questions, I will call the vote. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The vote carries.
Okay. Okay, now we move on to the next presentation. Two distinguished gentlemen joining us tonight, Bill Sheldon and Frank Admonson. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for bearing with us. You're now on the front stage. Who's ever going to speak first? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill Gibson. What we'd like to do tonight is just present to you a kind of a status of where we are with the replacement of the arches. I believe you all have a slide pack that we sent to the town clerk. So I'm going to do the first three slides, and then Mr. Adams will talk about the finances, and Mr. Sheldon will talk about the construction. So basically, the first slide is titled Introduction. In February 2018, the temporary Summerfest arches started to fail structurally. Second point is a meeting in the fall of 2018 was convened between the members of the Pelham Summerfest Committee and the Pelham Rotary Club. The outcome of the meeting was the two parties would join together to explore the feasibility of replacing the arches. The division of duties were the Rotary Club, Pelham Rotary Club, do the funding, and the take care of the engineering, design, and construction. So in February 2018, both parties presented to council their concept to replace the arches. Council informed the two parties they could proceed subject to staff approval of the proposed design. So the Rotary Club commenced a very effective fundraising campaign, and the Summerfest Committee interfaced with structural engineers, design specialists, suppliers, and the town's engineering and fire services staff. So what we are proposing is on slide 3. If our presentation to council tonight, in concert with the town engineering, fire, parks, and wellness departments, are proposing that the previous arches be replaced using the same footprint as the previous arches. So on that slide, you will see a bunch of X's. That symbolizes the arches, and where they touch the ground is exactly where the temporary arches touch the ground. On the right-hand side of the drawing is Pelham Square, and on the left-hand side is Pelham Street. So what we're proposing is we would like to replace the arches with brand new metal arches, concrete foundation designed as a permanent structure. This means that the structure will meet all current building codes and engineering standards, and designed for a 20-25 year lifespan. It's built to engineering standards. Now, if you look at the drawing, you'll see a huge box in the middle underneath. That is the silhouette that is required for the town of Pelham's fire boom truck to travel underneath those arches. The two smaller boxes off to the left and right of that represent a tractor trailer. That's the maximum size that's allowable on the road. So you can see that the tractor trailers and the boom truck can both travel underneath the arch. Just a second here, I got to catch up. So, Mr. Adams will talk to you about the finances.
Thanks, Bill. Mr. Mayor, councilors, senior staff, thanks very much for the opportunity for this presentation tonight and to give you an idea of where we stand with the project. So you've got the slide, I take it in front of you, which is indicating a cost for the arches of $120,430, which includes a contingency, which is basically 10% of the cost. There was a commitment from the Summerfest Committee that they would put $36,000 towards this project, and that's in hand. The Rotary Club, when we did the presentation to you, made a commitment for $20,000, and that was to be over $5,000 this year, so 2020-21. And then $5,000 in over a period of 3 other years for the other $15,000. The gala when this slide was put together raised about $4,000, mainly through the auction portion. Unfortunately, because of COVID and some other issues, one of the $1,200 for a B&B rental is now gone. And that's money we have to basically going to have to return. Bill put in here a sponsorship of $53,000. We've lost some other funding. One of the sponsors at $2,000, who has been unemployed over the last 9 weeks, has pulled out. It's indicated in there that there's a verbal commitment. This was a commitment for $10,000. It was there. We lost it because of a lot of negative controversy over the arches shortly after our initial presentation. We believe that is now back, though not absolutely guaranteed. And as Bill has indicated in here, that would bring us up to $108,000. And then another $15,000, which was to be over 3 years by the Rotary Club, for a total of $123,000. So basically this would cover our costs. Now what isn't in here is something that Councillor Mike Schiolfi had indicated over a period of time and a number of times that he would provide at no cost is crane services. With the situation that is before us now is we're not sure where that's at, so there may be a charge there which is not indicated. There is a sponsorship there for $4,000 from the PBA. Bill indicates $5,000. It's actually $4,000, which actually is in hand. We're ready to proceed if when the province lifts construction restrictions. This $10,000 is very dependent on timing and so we have to sort that out. Our predicament as a club now, as a Rotary Club, is essentially COVID related. I've been listening for the last hour to your folks and your COVID situation and all the issues. I know as a small business owner, I've been out of work for 9 weeks and would love to get back to work. The fundraising for the remaining 15K because of COVID is a bit of an issue. We had planned our second family fun day at Bissell's, which is a $20,000 project, which was postponed to the fall. It's now canceled completely by Ed at Bissell's. The other major fundraiser for another $20,000 is the Rotary TV auction in concert with 5 other Rotary clubs. It is certainly not going to bring in that kind of money. A lot of those dollars come in from gift certificates from restaurants, tickets for Blue Jays, tickets for the Sabres, and so on and so forth. We suspect that those are just not going to be there. Summerfest has been canceled, so we're losing funding from the bar sponsorship, as are the other Rotary clubs. We have planned a second purse bingo, which would brought in another $5,000, which again has been canceled. We were hoping for donation jars again this year, which were somewhat successful last year, but could be very successful this year because we don't have Summerfest. That's gone. And the 4 service clubs have sponsored, staffed the bar for funding, and that obviously is gone. On our commitment side as the club, we have commitments to Big Brothers and Big Sisters. E.L. Crosley student scholarships at a couple $1,000. Big Brothers and Big Sisters was between $5,000 and $8,000. Other student Rotary district programs, $3,000. District grants and money for Wellspring Niagara and another $3,000. So we're in a situation that when we made this commitment, nobody knew about COVID, and we thought those dollars were going to be there. So what our request is at this point in time, we're still committed to the $15,000. However, our request would be that as council has supported the request by the concert series for the landscaping at the park as a loan for around $75,000 to be paid back, that we're asking your consideration to do the same thing. We think, not positive, but we think we can provide $3,000 a year over 5 years. So instead of $5,000 over 3, we'd just like to flip that with support of council. Something else that isn't in here is a building permit. I have no idea what a building permit for this would cost. Once these things are built and constructed, they are turned over to the town. So they're going to be your arches. But I don't know what the cost is there. Crane services, I don't know what the cost is there. James Federico is a engineer that was engaged by the Catholic District School Board. That's a $6,500 cost. We're not sure where that's coming from. And we have signage, which is probably going to be somewhere between $5,000 to $8,000. So even though it looks that the cost is $120,000 and we have $123,000, the reality is that cost is probably somewhat more than $120,000. So that's my cheery news to council. And Bill and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. I'll open it up to the council. Any questions for either?
Mr. Mayor, could we do the questions at the end and let Sheldon do his part.
Yep. Yep, okay. I didn't realize that there was, so what's the next now?
Okay, one more slide.
Oh, okay, go ahead, sir.
Are you there, Bill?
Yep. Basically, the hard construction costs that are listed are a result of the negotiations to date by local companies. I can't do anything but assume at this stage in the game that these corporations will honor these bids as time goes on. It goes without saying that we have lost a lot of momentum in terms of interest, and as time goes on, if these corporations, some of who trade around the world.
Bill, could we stick to the slide, please?
They may not honor these bids because of competitive or time limits. But right now, that's where we are. Those numbers are real hard numbers, and based on my conversations with them, I am optimistic that they will hold them. Let's say until the end of the year, and then we'll have to go back. If the project isn't approved and under construction by then, we'll have to go back and talk to them.
Thank you.
Okay, if you go to the second from the last slide, I'll just walk you through where we are. We're actually in pretty good shape as far as the construction component. We've been working the design. We've been working with local engineers and structural and aesthetic designs for the arches, and the final detailing and foundation and the engineering drawings are just about completed, and we'll be getting back to Mr. Maher on those. Fabrication, we have a company, local company, who is going to make the arches out of steel. This is their business, and the steel components, for maintenance purposes, they're going to be galvanized internally, and then we're going to powder coat them with white paint over top of that. So they will need no maintenance for a good number of years. The foundation, we're probably going to go with a helical pile. The arches will sit on top of that, and then we've contracted with a local concrete firm, and they're going to build the bollards around the bottom of the arches to protect them. As Mike, or as it's been previously discussed, Councillor Mike was offering his professional contracts as far as the erection and the crane, and we're working on an alternative to that. So basically the timeline, upon acceptance of terms and conditions, scheduling costs, etc., with these service providers, and we're figuring about another month's work with the town engineer and fire department at Parks and Recreation. Once we got the go-ahead, we figure about 3.5 to 4 months to have them constructed. So we are having a meeting with the Pelham Summerfest Committee next week, and we're going to discuss our financial situation. And we'll also discuss with them the terms and conditions with the sub-trades to do this. So basically, all of the work will be done by local contractors. So the last slide is if anybody's got any questions.
So I will thank you for the presentation, first of all, gentlemen. I'll open up to members of council. Any questions or comments on the presentation? Councillor Wink.
So just a point of clarification, because the arches are being donated to the town, that precludes us from having to go out through the RFP processes. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'd like, Bill, thanks, but I'd like staff to state if that's correct or not.
Director of Public Works. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. CAO, did you want to comment on that?
Since the town is not the constructor, so our rules apply to us when we're either the constructor or leading off a project. In this instance, we have a community organization fulfilling that role on our behalf. And so we are not following our usual corporate policies, and we're deferring to the approach preferred by the Service Club.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Hi, thank you for your presentation, but I have a lot of reservations about this. I looked at the drawings you provided, and I find that they are not in the least aesthetically pleasing. And now this is your third time coming to us. You came with the glue lamb, which...
Excuse me, Councillor. I did not come to you with the glue lamb.
Okay, then who did?
That was presented in a newspaper article by somebody who is not part of the committee, and he proposed a glue lamb. And I've answered this question 3 times, Mr. Mayor. We never said it was going to be a glue lamp. We indicated that there could be a number of components, but we had to meet with the Director of Public Works first to determine what he required. And what he required, and we agree with 100%, this has to be a permanent structure that meets the Ontario Building Code and engineering standards, etc. Sorry to interrupt, Councillor, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Okay, so then moving on from the initial glue lamb that you said you did not present, it was discussed in council, and at the MCC there is the representation of what the arches will look like, but that representation is of basically a glue lamb structure. Okay, I've had a discussion with Mr. Adamson previously about that, but that aside, Mr. Sheldon said about hard numbers. I don't see any numbers in this at all, except for your inability to pay for these in the time it would take to construct them. We're talking about you being able to pay for them in 3 years or longer. So I suggest to you that you get your money and then come back to us to build the arches.
Well, Councillor, the reason there is not hard numbers, well, there is a hard number, and I disagree with Frank about the hard number, but him and I have discussed this, and we're going to have a meeting next week. Mr. Sheldon has done 2 things. He's gone out and he asked for a turnkey bid, and if we'd gone for an RFP, and that RFP would have cost us well over $200,000. What Mr. Sheldon has spent the winter doing is working with a number of vendors that are local. These people out of benevolence have been able to provide us with a hard number based upon what we have. Now, what we have to do now is next week, we've got to have a meeting, and a representative of the Rotary Club will be at the Summerfest meeting. We're going to discuss finances. Once we know how much money we have, Then we will then decide on what the final design, fabrication, and all that is. But I can assure you, Mr. Sheldon has spent many, many months and personal credence on his part discussing with these people. And although the arches are a steel construction, we've made allowance that they can be paneled in afterwards if we raise some more money. And we've also made allowance that those panels can be transparent and they can be filled full of light so that the arches will be completely illuminated. We can change all of the colors in. The three of us have spent almost a year and a half working on this, and we're trying to do the best we can with the money we had. Now, if C-19 hadn't come along, we would have been sitting here talking to you tonight to say, okay, we got the money, we got the drawings and everything else. We'll tell you who the vendors or the subtrades are, and we would have been back to Mr. Marr with a set of drawings for both the structure and the underpinnings. But unfortunately, as Frank has described, we're having vendors pulling back, mainly because they can't afford it. And this wasn't in our plan. When I went away for the winter in December, we looked like we were going to have money not to burn, but we certainly would have had a very good contingency fund. So if you want us to come back after we've solved our finances, it would be good to do that. But Frank or Bill has also pointed out that these people can only be benevolent for so long. You're getting a heck of a deal here at 120, even if it costs 130. We got a commercial person and it was over $200,000, and that was a proper RFP that they bid on. Okay, that's where we are.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor? Councillor Stewart? No. Okay, Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I've been a supporter of the last two presentations based on a number of facts. And these, we had a pretty clear agreement between the Rotary Club and I believe personally myself, which was the town. The first one was the first thing that was required would be a letter of recommendation by the Director of Public Works approving a professional engineer and ensuring that all proper documentation, like a certificate of authorization, insurance, valid Ontario license was provided. To avoid cost, I would suggest that this step should be done even before you go out for costs and engineering estimates. I mean, to do all this before coming to the Director of Public Works first, seems to me you're going to be spending a lot of money because in the end, he's the one that's going to be signing his name and approving the thing. The second point I've got is, to me, the last two presentations you made that the Rotary Club, in conjunction with their fundraising, was going to cover all the costs. All of us have had COVID happen to us, and we understand the cost. You heard what it's going to cost us to cover COVID. Your club and the town are exactly in the same boat. We have to come up with some way of covering the costs. And to me, the Rotary had a commitment to us that you were going to cover the cost. The third thing was the appearance. To me, the appearance that you have now looks like a Quonset hut or a greenhouse design. And that's not what the people signed up for. That's not what I supported. So you're changing the appearance, which I think is critical. All the drawings, all the advertising, the community guide, and all that we did gave a picture of what we had. And that's what people gave to. So I'm concerned that your appearance now is a total change of what the public agreed to. I understand Summerfest is gone. Summerfest is gone for all of us. We have the same concern. But the one thing that COVID has given us is a lot more time. So I suspect you need to sit back, take the proper time, go to the Director of Public Works first, come in with your engineer with the proper documentation to make sure you've got that approval before you proceed. That's my recommendation. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the Director of Public Works for his comment on that process or procedure?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Service Club's Summerfest Committee, as well as the school board and the representative engineer have had several meetings with town staff regarding the status of this project. So with this type of process where we are getting donated a structure, it's very unique. Personally, as Director of Public Works and it being a town asset at the end of the day, it would be much more preferable to have the town be in control and direct the process, the engineering, the approvals, and the tendering for construction. In this case, it was my understanding that my responsibility was to work with the service clubs and approve a project that was structurally compatible and in line with what was being presented originally as the replacement for the arches. So part of that process would be ensuring that the engineer on record who would be designing and stamping the drawings would be qualified to do so. And that would be vetted through the town's engineering department. In essence, we're not necessarily approving or doing design checks, but we are basically ensuring that the people and the experts that the service clubs have working on this project are qualified and able to do so. With respect to the type of structure, I do agree that it has changed from what was initially presented to council. And based on that change, I'm glad to see the service clubs coming back into council with the revised concept, to basically gain approval before moving forward any further with the project. So I'm not sure if that answered the question specifically.
Can I add to that?
Wait a minute, just wait a minute, Mr. Gibson. So, Councilor Hildebrand, did the director answer your concerns?
Well, the one question I would like asked is, don't you think it's advisable for them to come to you and at least provide you with the engineer, his certificate of authorization, his qualifications, and his licenses and his insurance to cover the cost before they start on the process? I would think that would be prudent in order to avoid a lot of future costs, because you obviously have the qualifications to determine what that structure should look like.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So in working with the service clubs, the engineering department at the town of Pelham, from the design that's been presented to us to date, was being performed by a structural mechanical engineer who practices in the public. I haven't seen any I haven't seen any finalized drawings, stamped drawings. I've seen concepts, and I've sat in meetings with that structural engineer. So until the town of Pelham, my department, receives stamped engineered drawings registered by a professional engineer in the province of Ontario, until that point in time, we wouldn't be able to approve any design. But sitting through the meetings that we've had to date, and meetings with one of the engineering staff, the engineer on record who's come up with a concept, public works staff was satisfied that they were a qualified individual to do the work.
Okay, now, Mr. Gibson, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, two things. Well, three, really. Councillor Hildebrand, when we started, we've met with the Director of Public Works, with our engineer, I think 4 times now. What we determined at the beginning of the conversation was that we didn't want to set a precedent and have something built over top of the street that did not meet the Ontario Building Code, because that would open Pandora's box. So when we started designing this with our engineer, it started costing a lot more money to basically build a 20 or 25-year structure. So that's where we are. And we have been meeting with Mr. Maher. What we wanted to do was, my second point was to come back to council and say, okay, this is where we are. The best we can afford right now, given the vagaries of financing, the best we can do is a steel structure that was in the drawings. Now, what we wanted to hear from you was if this is acceptable as a structure, aesthetically, engineering-wise. There will be a set of drawings. We have to get 3 parties together on a set of drawings. And what our intention was that if council more or less was in agreement with the grid design, if you want to call it that, then what we're going to do is then we would go ahead, pull the 3 parties together with our engineer, produce a set of engineered stamped drawings, and then I think in my presentation, I allowed about a month to meet with the Director of Public Works. We need the Fire Chief, and we need the Director of Recreation. And then we'll go to Mr. Maher and say, okay, here's what we're planning to build. We don't want to go ahead and do all this work if you as a group do not like the idea of the open steel grid work. What I tried to explain to you was that's the best we can afford right now. It means that the structure itself is a permanent, as far as the Ontario Building Code and Engineering Standards. It's built as a permanent structure, meaning that it's good for 20, 25 years. We've spent a lot of extra money in galvanizing it and then powder coating it, so there's no maintenance. Now, if the town or if council wants to meet, whatever, talk to us, and if you don't like the design, then there's no sense of us going ahead with that design and doing all the engineering work. Councillor Stewart said she didn't like the look of it. That's fine, everybody. But what I'm trying to tell you is, for the money that we think we can raise, this is the best we can do. But that structure can be added to later on if there's some more money comes due, and that extra money could be to cover the grid work over. We've made arrangements with the design so that you can do that. We can add lighting to it as money becomes available. But the structure itself is a 25-year structure, and as time goes by and as money goes by or comes along, we can add to that structure. So if you don't, yep. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I can answer that question, and I thought I answered it there. The appearance is so much different than what was presented and what was presented as a project to the public. I don't think there's any option for me to approve the appearance that you are presenting to us.
I agree, sir, and our biggest problem was the cost of making this a permanent structure. If you don't like the grid work, we'll try to go back and come back with something else, but we know it's going to cost. That structure you see right there, if we clad it, that will be the structure that we're going to clad, because that is a structural element. The engineer has designed it for wind load so we can add the shade sails and stuff. So if council wants to take that design away and come back to us and say, we don't like the grid design, we'd like it filled in or whatever, we'll talk to our subs, because it is fluid right now with our subs. As to like that design right now, we have hard prices. Bill Sheldon has hard prices. If we have to go back to them and say, okay, well, we got to do some cladding or whatever, then we'll take a look at it and we'll add that to our engineering component and we'll come back to you. But the reason we're here is not to have a huge discussion about it. We wanted to show you where we were with the amount of money we have and the vagaries of C-19 and our funding efforts. And that's why we came to talk to you. We didn't want to go ahead and produce the engineering drawings and all that sort of stuff and then have people say, well, that's not what I had in mind. That's fair enough. You have to live with this, so do I. We're just trying to provide the town with something, and it increased dramatically when it had to become a structure.
Thank you for that, Bill. If I can just ask one or two questions, and then we'll go to Councillor Wing. So I'll go to Frank, Mr. Adamson, on the cost. Somewhere along in your presentation, sir, I believe you alluded that as the way things stand right now, you're about 15,000 short. You wanted a $15,000 loan. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And that was the right from the get-go. We didn't have $20,000 sitting in the bank as a Rotary Club. We were committed to raise the necessary money. We're not asking the town to pay for this. We're asking the town to consider a loan over 5 years. Fully repayable by the Rotary Club at $3,000 a year over 5 years. Not unlike what Council has done with the Bandshell Committee and funding for the leveling of Peace Park. We are not asking the town to pay for this. Okay. We're asking for the support from the town, if at all possible.
The other question that in your presentation, you mentioned some money owing another individual, Mr. Federico, I believe. Is that money owing him, and I forget what you said that figure was, is that included in the 15,000 or is that on top of? Because I believe, unfortunately, you said you didn't know where that money was going to come from.
These James Federico was engaged by the Niagara Catholic District School Board, and the price for those engineering services were $6,500. Bill can better answer that if that is included within that $120,430.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson.
Pardon me, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So during Mr. Frank's presentation, he mentioned a sum of money that was owed an engineer that was hired by the Catholic School Board, Mr. Federico, and I still didn't hear that correct figure. But so is that figure owed this gentleman? Is that included in the 15,000, or is that
yes.
Not?
Well, it's included in the budget of 120. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So it is looked after in the budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then one last one, but then I'll go to Councilor Wing. The concrete that this is sitting on, the structure is sitting on, is that also in the budget? Because it didn't sound like it was, but it is. Okay. Thank you, Thank you for that. Okay, Councilor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Gibson. Do you have a sense on if the arches were cladded, just an estimate on how much it would cost to clad them?
I think we're looking at, it depends on what we use, Councillor. The original idea was we were going to use plastic that they use for the hockey boards. We figured that would be almost bulletproof. And I think that was going to cost us an extra $15,000 to $18,000. Now, we can use some other material if, like I say, what we're working with is what we showed you as far as the drawing is concerned with our subs. If council comes back or the town or whatever and says, look, we'd like these things clad, then we'll start renegotiating with them, and then we'll get another price, and then we can say, well, okay, can we raise this amount of money, and will this be aesthetically pleasing? So that's where we are, but figure about another 15,000 to 18,000, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. So from my perspective, you're creating a far far better structure than what was being proposed with respect to the metal and everything. I agree with the councillors that right now it's not what was presented initially, but what we're getting now is far better quality construction than what we had before. We just have a bit of a shortfall. So, you know, whether there's further fundraising after they're up or whatever we look for the resources, at least we've got the structure that we can add to it at a later date.
That's correct. At our original discussion with Mr. Marr, building inspector indicated that this has to be to building standards and stuff. And, you know, I worked in the government for 35 years and I didn't want to set a precedent and say, well, okay, put another temporary structure back up again. Because that, you know, that'll just open the door. And I can assure you, Councillor, that cost us a lot of money to have that thing meet the Ontario Building Code. The other thing too is that we have to put concrete bollards around the bottom, which were not on the temporary ones. In case a car or a snowplow bangs into them, the concrete bollards will protect the structure so it doesn't come down. So that's a little bit extra, plus the foundation work as well. But you're absolutely right to summarize your comments. This thing is a very strong structure and it's designed to add to it later on if we wish to do that.
Thank you. Any other questions? I see Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Wink mentioned that, you know, these would be far better than what was there before. But to that, what was there before was designed as a temporary structure for one event. You know, so that's apples and oranges. But then again, to the costing of the arches, I don't see that there's a fixed price for the finish coat on them, for the powder coating, or for the foundations, or for erecting them. So I don't know how you actually came up with the total cost for the arches.
Mr. Sheldon has been in discussion with the companies. If you look at the slide pack, Councillor Stewart, the fabrication of the metal and the galvanizing and the powder coating is included in that price. Then the other components are the spherical pilings and then the concrete work on top. And then of course the erection. We did not want to publish the bids, if you want to call them that, from the vendors. We want to basically form a contract with them and get those numbers down hard, and then we will publish who got the work and what the dollar value is involved. But right now, if council is basically saying we'd like you to go back and see what it's going to cost to clad them, we'd be glad to do that. Using that steel structure, as Councillor Wink had stated, it's a very robust structure.
So here's what here's my thoughts, and then obviously we'll go to council. I don't know if this is what council's thinking. You guys sat through the flower bed thing, $21,000 that council didn't want to spend on flowers. We get a contest going perhaps. So this C-19, COVID-19 has obviously affected everybody, every company, every government. So yeah, I mean, we made a deal, and Frank, you mentioned it with the band shell, but that of course was last fall, and that was of course pre-COVID-19. This town, when we start to do a budget, for next year, taking in everything that we are going to be, the revenue that we're going to be losing and the added cost of COVID-19. We're down like everybody else. We really don't know the final figures, but we do know that they're not going to be good. So I think, and you guys know that I've fully supported this project right from the beginning. Goodness, I got a painting in my office that proved my support. Yes, but I think this council, I know I would, and obviously we'll put it back to council, I would like to see the figures finalized a little bit more, because, tell you the honest truth, I don't know if we as a town are going to be able to do this, or even if we have an appetite to do this funding, which, if we go with the cladding, which, whatever, we're up to $30,000 or $35,000. So that's my feeling, is that perhaps this meeting was, well, I know where you had it, but perhaps you can, I would like to see firmer numbers and perhaps with the cladding on it. I'll open up back to council to see, am I on the right track here? Or what's the rest of council say on this? Councilor Hildebrand? You're muted, sir.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor.
There you go.
Mr. Mayor, I totally agree with your analysis of the situation. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? So gentlemen, with that, Councilor Stewart?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The way I see it, this is a project that wasn't put forward by the town. It was a project put forward by the Rotary Club and Summerfest, and it's not something that the town needs in any way to be successful. It's something that you want to build and donate to the town, and I can see that and I can understand it. But at this point, when you keep mentioned a number of times about the money you have now, perhaps it's better to defer the whole thing for a year, 2 years, until there's a more successful fundraising effort and it can go forward more smoothly.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Not seeing, so I'll put the question back to you two gentlemen. You guys obviously represent the Arches. Myself, I feel there's a great public desire for the Arches, and I don't deny that. But I'm just, in this uncertain time that we are now into, that's not our fault, not your fault, unless this project can be guaranteed to be 100% funded, I honestly just don't think this council has an appetite to go further, and especially when we think of the taxpayer out there that is laid off, wondering where his next mortgage payment is coming from. Much as I love this project, I just wonder if we do take it back another 6 months, Mr. Gibson, I know it's your heart and soul. What do you think it can stand that kind of a setback?
I agree with Councillor Stewart and yourself. These are unusual times. There are a number of people that are seriously hurting. One of our donors was concerned about the same thing. Is this the right thing to do at the right time? I'm not opposed to putting it off for a while. Costs go up a little bit. Well, I guess they go up. But we were trying to, have something in the fall as a good news kind of coming out type thing. If council would like to see us put off to next summer, I'll have to talk to the Summerfest committee about that. I have a meeting with them next week. We can certainly take that under advisement and come back to you. But it's not like we have, signed contracts or anything right now with anybody. It's goodwill, verbal commitments.
Thank you for that, sir. Councillor Hahn, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Okay.
Mayor, I just agree that based on the fact that we're in these unprecedented times, I just don't think that this is a project that we can contribute to at this particular juncture. I also did have a question though for Mr. Gibson, and that is this grid design. Have you taken this back to any of the people that have already supported you through funding, or in any way have you put it in the paper? Is anybody but us seen this change in design?
Well, Councillor Hahn, what we wanted to do was we wanted to show council what we could afford, and this is what it would look like. We're having a meeting next week with the Summerfest committee. We have not shown all of them the drawing, and I wanted to see what they thought about it. And then we were going to then firm up commitments from everybody, and then we go back to our sponsors and say, okay, we're ready to go. This is what we're going to do. I agree with you 100%. When we started this project with your last spring when we talked to you, none of us visualized just the enormity of doing things that aren't needed to be really done, like essential services. And I work for the government for 35 years. I understand. Okay, there's time to do things right.
Done. Is that it, Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments going forward? Any other last comments from the presenters? If Frank, I know that this obviously isn't what you came here to hear. Any comments, please?
Unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, my battery went dead on my iPad, and so I missed the last 5 minutes or so. So what's the, so if you can just apprise me of where council is on.
Okay. So we more or less have, I think, reached a consensus that at this point in time, council does not have an appetite to put in 30 or 35,000, and I believe Mr. Gibson supported perhaps that we'll put this project on at least a 6-month burner, on a back burner. Perhaps during that time, the Arches, meaning you and Bill, I know you guys are the main guys, the main movers here with the support group, can either come forward with complete financing, so this town will not have to support it with tax dollars, and just perhaps come back with a price that with a completely cladded seems to be another sticking point. So we just more or less decided that in this time of pandemics and uncertainty and so many people not knowing where they're going to get the next couple of bucks from, that we just don't we just don't have the capacity to make a loan as such at these times. So we'd like to see you guys, the Arches Committee, take a step back, look at your financing, and then come back to council at a later date.
Okay. Could we make it January 26th, sir?
Well, I believe so.
I'll be 75 then on that day, so that'd be a good day to come back to you.
So you're looking for a birthday present, okay?
Yes, I would.
Okay, well, let's if we would love to have you back. And Councilor, any other comments on that? Is everyone happy with that decision that they will come back January, Bill's birthday, and we will hopefully have a better handle on the situation?
Reconsider that.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay.
Thank you for all of your time and consideration, and we agree 100%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to both of you, and good luck on the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck on the project, thank you. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, the clerk has a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart, be it resolved that Council receive the presentation from the Pelham Summerfest and Pelham Rotary Club Working Committee regarding the status of the Arches Replacement Initiative for information. Mr. Mayor, did you wish any further comment?
Any further comment on this motion? Not seeing any, the clerk will call the vote.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. We don't have a report by regional councillor?
Correct.
Okay. So we're down to adoption of minutes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a motion on the floor by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. First, CO8, regular council minutes of May 4th, 2020. And secondly, Special Council 08-2020, Special Council minutes of May the 4th, 2020. If you wish to call for errors and omissions.
Yep. Any errors or omissions or other comments to be made on these minutes? Not seeing any, I'll ask the clerk to call the vote.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. More minutes, right? Regular council minutes. Oh, no, you already did that. I'm sorry. Consent agenda items.
So you're at item number 7.
Yes. Okay. Is there any counselor that wants to pull any of the consent agenda items? And Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to lift item 8.3.4, 8.5.1, 8.5.2, 8.5.3, and 8.5.4.
Okay, thank you. Any other counselors? Okay, not seeing any. 5 and 4.
So I have a motion by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the May 19th, 2020 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable, save and accept items 8.4.1, 8.5.1, 2, 3, and 4. Are there any, Councillor Hildebrandt, did I get one of those wrong?
That was 8.3.4.
My apologies, 8.3.4.
Yes.
Thank you. And is there any discussion on the consent agenda items, Mr. Mayor, through you?
No.
Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry. Any discussion on the other consent agenda items? I'm not seeing any.
So then I will call the question on the remaining items on the consent agenda. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, Councillor Hildebrand, 8.3.4, then I take it, the first up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is an observation and I hope a money-saving item. My personal insurance company, first of all, when they saw that COVID was coming in, they sent me a notice, and all I had to do was fill in some information with regards to receiving money back. So I've been able to receive credits from two different insurance companies now because of this. Because of traveling and all kinds of extenuating circumstances. I'm also president of another Canadian operation, and once I saw this, I applied for credits through the insurance because I realized the insurance premiums are huge. When you look at Appendix 3, the insurance costs at the Meridian Center are near $50,000. And I know I've spoken with the treasurer, possibly she can comment on this, because I think there's money to be gained from our insurance companies, at least to ask, because in all cases when I've asked, like where I'm president of, I asked, because those are corporate insurances, and definitely they came up with allowances they'd be willing to give me, but if you don't ask, you don't get. So I think here's an opportunity for us to possibly make some savings, and I'd like the Director of Corporate Services to address this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have been in contact with our insurance company, and we are definitely looking into that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Down to the next one, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, I mean, sorry.
So the item has been lifted, so it wasn't included in the resolution on the consent agenda. I do need a resolution then to council consider report 2020-0072 corporate services for information being the March 2020 financial reports. And we can use the same mover and seconder as the consent agenda. That is Councillor Stewart and Councillor Hahn. But now we need to move to receive that report.
Okay. So we've heard the report that we just discussed with Councillor Hildebrand and the treasurer. Any other discussion on that? If not, the clerk will call the vote.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stewart? Oh, now you're muted. There, thank you.
Yes.
And Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
That motion is carried.
Okay, Councillor, down to the 8.5.1, I believe.
Correct. This is a report where Regional Council approved report of Regional Council April the 23rd and 2020. It deals with property tax policy rates. On page 4 of 29, it states the first year of the new assessment cycle, based on this information, the residential class is anticipated to experience an assessment increase of approximately 50%. Now, what that means is the farm properties right now have a tax factor of 0.25. All of a sudden, at this meeting, the Regional Council approved the residential rate increase from 1 to 1.5. So, to me, I can't even consider or contemplate how in this day and age the region could have contemplated such a huge increase, because obviously it shifts the cost significantly to the residents, because I didn't see any other adjustments in tax rates. And basically that's my comment and the question to the treasurer. I see this as a shift of tax burden to residential properties. And I'm not sure how this passed through Regional Council without some big article being in the paper.
Madam Treasurer?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, first of all, since that report was written, MPAC has announced that they're going to defer the assessment of property assessment by another year. So 2021 was supposed to be an assessment year, and they're going to defer it to, 2020 was the assessment year, they're going to defer it another year. So that won't be applicable with regards to the assessment increase. With regards to the ratios are set by the region, and the residential rate stays at 1. That doesn't change. It's the other rates that are adjusted towards the residential rate. The residential rate cannot change at 1. But right now, that whole paragraph is not applicable for this year because of what MPACT has done with COVID to defer the assessment by 1 year. I have called the region to get more information on that, so I can get back to you about that, Councillor Hildebrand. But right now, it's not going to apply to us for this year.
Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, so to the treasurer. So then in a year's time, then once the deferral's lifted, it's an automatic, or it would go back to regional council for debate at that time?
The property tax ratios are approved annually. So it would have to go back to regional council.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, the next one.
Oh, no, I need to
Oh,
vote
wait,
on
oh,
this.
yeah, we gotta do this, yeah, yep, sorry.
It's quite all right. So we'll use the same mover and seconder, Councillor Stewart and Councillor Hahn, that agenda item 8.5.1, be it resolved that Council receive the Niagara Region report dated May 7th, 2020 regarding 2020 property tax policy, ratios, and rates for information. And I will call the vote.
Any discussion? Nope, go ahead.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The vote carries.
Okay, Councillor, down to the next one.
Okay, 8.5.2 is Arches funding for lighting and shades. The question I have for the Director of Public Works, since we've now delayed the project to 2021, is that funding still available for them, or was that all firm funding?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the funding is for the 2020 calendar year, but this specific funding for the shade structures for the arches was in basically in conjunction with the 2021 Canada Summer Games that are going to be coming to town. So I believe that there would be no issue with extending the funding for the shade structures until 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will call the vote on this report, please. Again, moved by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn. That Council received the correspondence from the Region of Niagara dated May 7th, 2020, supporting the Pelham Arches Canada Summer Games Renewal Project through the 2020 Pelham, Public Realm Investment Program for information. And Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The vote carries.
And I think you have one more, Councillor?
I have a couple more.
Two more? Okay.
8.5.3 is Rice Road tree planting. It was again funding for $30,000 for tree planting along Rice Road. And I think there was also a grant involved with this at the intersection of Rice Road. And I'd like the Public Works Director to address this for me, please.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's correct. It is the same funding source, two different applications. In the 2020 budget, we have funding through the PRIP grant, which is the Public Realm Improvement Project grant. And what that does, well, that project that's in our 2020 capital budget is for a landscaping feature and around the Port Robinson Road and Rice Road intersection. This is a regional grant. That was included as part of our 2020 capital budget ask. For this new grant, this would be it was a grant submitted under the same funding source through the region, and is basically in consideration of placing some additional street trees and making some improvements to the multi-use path that runs parallel to Rice Road, basically between Highway 20 and now south of Port Robinson Road.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on that?
No, thank you.
Okay.
So with no amendments being proposed to that, we'll have a motion by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council received correspondence from the Region of Niagara dated May 7th supporting the Rice Road Tree Planting and Trail Enhancement Project through the 2020 Public Realm Investment Program for information. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Councillor?
The next item is 8.5.4.
Yep.
8.5.4 is Canada Celebrations. This was a grant for $14,650 for Canada Day celebrations. Obviously, we don't have Canada Day celebrations. To the Director of Recreation, if we don't have the celebration, how is this money going to be spent now? Can you?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. This funding was applied for, obviously, prior to COVID. And actually, we just received, I know that the letter states it was given to us in March. We received it last week. And along with the approval letter of the 14,000, which is basically our normal amount that we receive from Heritage Canada annually, came with some stipulations. So they've offered the funding the same, and what we had to do is send back a accounting of how we would spend this money if we were to receive it on a virtual Canada Day event. And as you know, that is what we're working on, a virtual Canada Day event. Working with the province, the region, as well as having activities within each of the communities. So we have reapplied for the funding, and we're just waiting for approval to go ahead. And that funding would be for, excuse me, for musicians, for talent, and all be virtual, as well as house decorating materials, and as well, there is a fair amount of a cost to put on a virtual, celebration with the platform that we would share that cost across the region. So staff is working with other recreation departments with regard to the virtual celebration, as well. The province does sit on that committee. So we're hoping to hear the outcome over the next couple of weeks, and I will report back at that time.
Thank you.
Any further discussion from other councillors? Not seeing any.
Thank you. So once again, on a motion by Councillor Stewart and seconded by Councillor Hahn, be it resolved that Council received correspondence from the Minister of Canadian Heritage dated March 23rd, 2020, awarding a grant in the amount of $14,650 to support the Pelham Canada Day community celebration for information. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. Is he done?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now where are we? 9.1?
8.7.
So now we are at the items for consideration. We are at 10.2 staff reports. The first staff report is with regard to corporate services, December 2019 financial reports. Oh, sorry. So we have a motion. This is with regard to agenda item 10.2.1. Motion by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0028 Corporate Services for information, and that Council approve the recommended transfers of the 2019 operating surplus to the reserves and reserve funds as outlined in Appendix 6. Mr. Mayor, you can call for discussion on the motion.
Yep. Any discussion on this from any councillors? Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, under capital projects, Appendix 5, page 7. Under Park 03-18, under Recreational Cultural Services, there was a design build project budgeted at $230,000, and we spent $300,000. The question for the treasurer, I have two in this area. Can you confirm how this money was spent and how we arrived at being at $300,000 versus $230,000 the budget?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we received an anonymous donation of $75,000 on top of the $230,000 that we have in the budget. So that equals about $305,000. So we actually came under budget by $5,000, and this is to purchase additional play equipment in the Lookout Park.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, I couldn't find any description on how we received that money, but here's the big one. I thought, and I know that council canceled all the Warnoff project, which was forecast to cost us $8 to $9 million in this last year. Where are the savings forecasted relative to this cost? Because that's a huge number, and I couldn't find it anywhere.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the actual cost of the Warnoff actually has not been put into any budget. It was just been part of the original design of East Fawn Hill, but we don't have it in an existing budget right now to develop that. So it was put on hold.
Yeah. So we just didn't spend money we didn't have.
Right, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Any other councillors? Councillor Wink.
So, as chair of the audit committee, I'd just like to say how well staff, in particular the treasurer's department, has stewarded our finances over this past year. If you look at where we were at the beginning of the year and where we are now, we're being asked to place $962,000 in reserves, which is a great accomplishment, and I'd like to congratulate staff for that.
Yeah, I think the rest of council is behind that 100%. Yes.
Sure.
It is a great improvement for when this council started the term of office, and council and staff have done a tremendous job working together and supporting the treasurer and her assistant and getting these numbers straightened around. Great accomplishment by everybody. Thank you. Treasurer, Madam Treasurer?
Yeah, I just want to say that, when you look at the year and what has transpired, it's been really a big team effort with regards to staff, but also with the committees that we have established with council. And I really want to highlight the Utility Sustainability Committee and the work that committee has done with our staff. We have saved over $250,000 just in the hydro costs from the original budget. Just think about it. This is our first full year of the community center. And in most organizations, when you open up a facility as large as the Meridian Community Center, normally your budget is a bit short. We went the other way. We're actually about $400,000 under the original budget. $250,000 pertains to the hydro initiatives from the Utility Sustainability Committee, but also to almost about $80,000 pertains to additional revenues from the arena. This has been a huge success in the town as far as the community coming to the community center and really supporting it. And we've also had other areas where, we have, increase in our planning revenues and also the supplementary tax levy of almost 160,000. So there's been different areas in our budget lines that we've actually been either to increase revenues or decrease expenses. So it's been a tremendous team effort with the staff and also with the committee. So we want to thank the committees for helping the staff out with their expertise on bringing some of these costs down. It really is a tremendous story to tell in the first year of the community center.
You're right.
Great, thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. As part of the audit committee, I would also like it to be known that our audit committee, oh my God, I lost the word, accountants, we're so pleased to see that the audit was so thorough and so clean, and it was all done under extenuating circumstances with the COVID. So again, congratulations to our corporate staff.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Okay, and not seeing any, I will turn it to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, this is to receive Corporate Services Report 2020-0028. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Just before I say yes, are we receiving all the reports in item 10.2?
This is for report 10.2.1, report 2020-0028.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Yes.
You're welcome. Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries.
And the next is 10.2.2.
The next item on the agenda is the Administrative Monetary Penalties Policy and Procedures, Report 2020-0070, Fire Department. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0070 and that Council considers approving Administrative Municipal Penalty System, or AMPS, policies and procedures as required by Ontario Regulation 33307 as follows. 1. Prevention of political interference in the administration of the AMPS program policy. 2. Public complaints procedures for the administration of the AMPS program policy. 3. Administrative Municipal Penalty System, financial control and reporting policy. And 4. Conflict of interest in relation to the administration of the AMPS program policy. That motion is by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand, if you wish to call for comment.
Okay. Any comment on this motion? Not seeing any, then we will call the vote, please.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Okay, next item, 10.2.3, confirmation levels of service. Yep, through the clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I have a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0069 and that Council repeal Policy S801-13 and approve the Public Works Winter Operations Policy S80204, if you wish to call for comment.
Any comment from any councillors on this motion? Not seeing any. I will have the clerk to please call the vote.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Next item, 10.2.4. implementation of the industry's odorous bylaw, cannabis bylaw, I suppose. A motion.
Mr. Mayor, we have a motion by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0075 and that staff be directed to amend the Odorous Industries Bylaw 4202 of 2020 as it relates to the inclusion of an administrative penalty system and an increase to the minimum penalty under the Provincial Offences Act, and that Council approve the amendment to the Odorous Industries Bylaw. If you wish to turn it over for discussion.
Any discussion on this? I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, I'd like to make an amendment to the motion to the last paragraph. And I'd like to, the paragraph said the council approved, and I'd like to amend it to say we're receiving the bylaw for information.
Yeah, have you got a seconder on that? Councillor Hahn. And would you like to speak to that amendment, Councillor?
Absolutely. The reason why I'm asking for it to be received for information is the complete agenda for this meeting, this council meeting, including the 2019 budget approval. I spent an enormous amount of hours going through this. The budget alone, when I printed out all the details, was nearly 100 pages. I'm not saying I'm not approving it. Right now, I need more time to approve it properly. And bylaw 4107 requires that I have 5 working days to approve items on the agenda. And I'm asking for that bylaw to be upheld.
So do we vote on that?
Mr. Mayor, through you, you may wish to turn the discussion over to the Director of Planning for comment.
Okay.
It is her report.
Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council will recall that back on March 23rd, it adopted the Odorous Industries Nuisance Bylaw. And at that time, Council asked for a report on implementation of that bylaw, which this is the report for that. You had wanted it in May. So we worked at preparing this report. It's been a report that's involved bylaw staff as well as planning staff, because when it comes to enforcement and implementation, that will be bylaw staff that do that work. So the report has identified a number of things in terms of the implementation on the Odorous Industries Nuisance Bylaw. There was equipment that we have purchased. There's training that we're going to do. There's a statement of work that the committee, the Cannabis Control Committee, prepared as it relates to hiring a third-party odor consultant. And when the bylaw was circulated to the Regional Prosecution's Office, they made recommendation for 2 kind of changes or amendments to the Odorous Industries Bylaw. The one being the introduction of administrative municipal penalties and the increase in the minimum fine under the Provincial Offences Act from $500 to $5,000. Those proposed changes to the bylaw were discussed with the Cannabis Control Committee last week. They indicated that they agreed in principle with the proposed changes. They wanted to see the actual amending bylaw, and that is on the agenda for their discussion tomorrow evening. But in principle, they were okay with the proposed amendment. The report was written so that if this matter, if the report was approved, then the bylaw would come to council on June 1st in 2 more weeks. If the report is not approved or it's deferred and just received for information, council should provide direction to staff as to when you want us to bring the proposed amendment back to council.
Thank you. And I believe the clerk has words.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarity to underscore what the Director of Planning has indicated that the bylaw is not before you for approval this evening. The draft bylaw is attached to the report. Perhaps the recommendation should have said recommend approval to the next meeting. The bylaw itself wouldn't come before council until June 1st if this is approved. The bylaw is not being put for you for approval this evening.
Okay. So the motion then, I'm afraid, what is the motion on this particular bylaw then?
So Councillor Hildebrand and Councillor Wink have presented a motion that the final paragraph be amended to only receive the odorous industry bylaw, not to recommend it for approval for June 1st.
I see. So if that amendment carries, then will it still be allowed to come on June 1st?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would be looking for additional information on that motion because if it only receives it for information, it basically leaves it in purgatory. There is no date to bring that back. We do need instruction on when to bring that bylaw back.
Councillor Hildebrand?
I think I can provide that for you very easily, and that the information would come back after the Cannabis Control Committee, which we've already said is receiving the information tomorrow, has given the opportunity to review it and make a comment, and the amending zoning bylaw amendments, the OPA and ZBA for cannabis, be approved.
So if the amending motion were then to read that the final paragraph be amended to receive the odorous industries bylaw and to refer it to the Cannabis Control Committee, or to bring it back once the Cannabis Control Committee has reviewed it? I just need a timeline attached to that amendment, please, Council.
Well, the timeline I'm proposing that the timeline being after the zoning bylaw amendment is approved by council.
Councillor Hahn, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I through you, Mayor, that's exactly it. I think that my understanding is that the Cannabis Control Committee they want some time to review this, and that the proposed amendment, they're content with the concept, but they need the time to review this. So the biggest priority right now is obviously the OPA and ZBA. So that's the biggest fish to fry right now. So they need time to see it and then and review it and come back. So I would say at this point it would be at least closer to the end of July. So without a calendar in front of me of the dates, if there's a meeting perhaps at that time.
Director of Public Planning, I'm sorry, Ms. Weens.
Thank you. So the Odorous Industries bylaw was adopted on March 23rd, and it's to take effect in 90 days, which takes you to, I think it's June 21st or 20th. So certainly we were trying to get these changes in place by the time that bylaw came into effect. If it's going to be adopted afterwards, that's not the end of this world, but it will be after the bylaw comes into effect.
Thank you.
Councillor Wink.
Councillor Wink.
So I don't understand the need why we're waiting for the zoning bylaw to be done when we've already passed this bylaw. We're just being asked to make an amendment to that bylaw. So I don't understand the rationale on postponing it that much further. If you want the Cannabis Control Committee to look at it, they're meeting this week. This can come back to council on June 1st. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Councillor Hildebrand. Is that possible?
Right now, as far as I understand, it's not a priority. We have other things we need to accomplish first. And like I said, I have not had sufficient enough time. I spent enormous amount of hours on this budget. And the bylaw says that I should have 5 business days before something is brought to me for approval at the agenda meeting. And I'm calling for that agenda meeting process to be held.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with the procedural bylaw changes for the pandemic, the agenda is released later than normal.
Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mayor, June 15th would be the preferred date for me. If we can work for June 15th, if that date is can be worked into the deferral for the clerk.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hahn, are you presenting a motion to amend the timing on the amending motion then to bring that bylaw forward on June 15th?
Yes.
Okay, and do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Hildebrand? So now you're going to... So any further discussion on the amendment to bring the bylaw forward on June 15th for consideration? I will call the vote on that amendment as soon as I get my system caught up with me here. So members of council, you're voting on the amendment to bring this back on June 15th. Is everyone clear on that amendment? Okay, I will call the vote. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
No.
The motion carries for the 15th. Now we have an amending motion by Councillor Hildebrand and Councillor Wink that the final paragraph be amended to receive the odorous industries bylaw and that the bylaw be brought forward to council for consideration on June 15th. Any discussion on that amendment?
Any discussion? Not seeing any. We'll ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
No.
The motion carries. Mr. Mayor, the motion now before council is that staff be directed to amend the odorous industries bylaw 4202-2020 as it relates to the inclusion of the administrative penalty system AMPS and an increase to the minimum penalty under the Provincial Offences Act, and as amended, that the council receive the odorous industries bylaw, which would then be brought forward for council's consideration on June 15th.
Okay. Any discussion on this? Not seeing any. Call the vote.
To get them all recorded here. And Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
No.
The vote carries.
Okay. Next one is 10.2.5, leaves of absence, employees. And the clerk has a motion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on a motion by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0052 for information and that Council approve the leave of absence policy as amended, attached hereto as Appendix A.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? I thought perhaps, Mr. CAO, you would perhaps a small comment on it, perhaps?
This is the paperwork equivalent of housekeeping. And we have a cleaner house, or are about to.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's not much of to discuss. Thank you. Any other discussion? Oh, Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question about this, but I know that it will need to be addressed in closed session. So if possible, I would like to bring it up then.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Not seeing any other debate, we'll ask the clerk for the vote.
Through Mr. Mayor, just a little bit of clarity. Does the councillor wish not to approve this, or are we okay to proceed with the report and you'll ask your question?
No, fine to proceed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. Next one, unfinished business or new business. Anyone? Yes, Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, yes, actually I have two pieces I'd like to submit for new business. So the first one, seeing as we're just hot off the topic of CCC, as substantial work has been undertaken towards completion of the official plan.
I'm sorry. Wait a second.
I may have missed it early in the meeting, but I did not see a motion to add new items to the. Okay.
And so you're not enabling me to do this? Is that what I'm hearing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that's not my call. I just want to make sure I didn't miss something because normally I have an item of new business listed on my agenda if there is one brought.
She can continue.
It's fine with you?
Yep. Yes.
In fairness,
yes.
Councillor Hahn may have asked my opinion, and I think I told her I didn't see a problem with her introducing an item at this point in the agenda. If our preference here is that be done at the beginning of the meeting, which fair enough, then she simply relied on my advice to her detriment. We wouldn't normally hold that against her. We'd wrap my knuckles, not the councillors. She is entitled to rely on me for generally giving good advice, which happens at least half the time, right?
So consider your knuckles wrapped.
Yes. Okay, Councillor, continue.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't wrapping knuckles. I just want to make sure I had my processes correct.
Okay, where you go?
Okay. As substantial work has been undertaken towards completion of the official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment relating to cannabis, I'm putting forth a motion to ensure the town clerk will place the Cannabis Control Committee on each of the agendas for the June and July council meetings so that they may continue to report to council on their progress and present the final amendments for consideration and approval.
Okay, thank you. Madam
Do we have
Clerk.
a seconder for the motion?
Pardon me?
Do we need a seconder for the
Yes,
motion?
and a seconder for that motion. Yes, Councillor Heidelbrand. Discussion. Oh, but that's for next meeting anyway. Oh, that was. Oh, I see. Yeah, that was a motion. Yeah. Okay.
My understanding, Mr. Mayor, is that the councillor is asking that the clerk be directed to place a delegation on each of the June meetings and the 2 meetings in July for the Cannabis Control Committee.
Yeah, and you're right. As if we were to stick to the rules, you're not supposed to bring a motion unless it's on the agenda. This should have been a motion to what's the term?
Notice.
A motion of notice.
Under the procedural bylaw, it would be a notice of motion to be added to the next agenda, a motion to be considered at this meeting. Under the procedural bylaw is to be under the name of the mover and seconder printed on the agenda, but it wouldn't be under right. It wouldn't be under new business. It would be under motions and notices of motion. But
okay,
we have it here. So
okay. So discussion on it.
So is there discussion?
The
on
discussion
the motion?
on this motion. Councillor Hahn, you brought the motion forward. You want any words to it or self-explanatory?
It's self-explanatory. I just want to ensure that our Cannabis Control Committee will have a placeholder on each of the agendas from basically now, so June 1st and through June and all of July, to ensure that they have adequate time to present to us, answer questions, and report back to council. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Any other discussion? Not seeing any? We'll ask for the vote.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
The motion for direction is carried.
Okay. And did you have another one, Councillor Hahn?
I do. I wish to put forward the following notice of motion. Be it resolved that the town of Pelham should approve the hiring of independent planning, engineering, or parking consultant to provide a master parking study to town council in 2019. Staff have written multiple reports on this issue, and town now assessed multiple potential land sales and potential development applications where the adequacy of parking has been a flashpoint issue. The cost of such a study is estimated at between $45,000 and $60,000. This is unbudgeted expenditure, I understand, and I would ask staff then to advise as to finding funding at the next council meeting. I do have some remarks I can make, but if there's discussion this time, but I do have remarks that I can make to speak to this.
I'll ask the clerk. I don't believe there's any discussion on a notice of motion. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, so once again, so I just want some clarity. I'm understanding the councillor to indicate that she wants to issue a notice of motion. So notice of motion, then the motion would be printed on the agenda for the June 1st meeting under the name of the mover and seconder with all of the wording that the councillor just read.
Correct.
Okay. And do you?
So she's actually bringing, it's not an item of new business, it's an item under motions and notices of motion under Article 14 on the agenda. It's a notice of motion. So
do you want me to repeat that in two more?
I can move it down with council's indulgence. I can move it down to the appropriate category of motions and notices of motion. And I would just ask the councillor if you could forward it to me in writing. And if you do have a seconder for the motion, give me the seconder and we'll put it on the agenda for June 1st.
Okay.
So it will be the actual motion itself will be considered June 1st. Is that the intent? Do I have the intent correct? Okay, thank you.
Yes, notice of motion, right.
Okay, and you have another one, Councillor Hahn?
No, that's all. I was just, if you wanted me to speak further to that, I can, but I can also speak to that once it's brought back at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other? No, so we don't debate that. Okay. Any other notices of motion to be brought forward? Not seeing any.
Okay, we got to go back.
Pardon me?
So now we, through you, Mr. Mayor, we need to go back on the agenda to bylaws.
Yes, confirming bylaw.
No.
What bylaw?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion by Councillor Wink and seconded by Councillor Hahn. We are at agenda item 13, presentation and consideration of bylaws.
Okay.
Be it resolved that Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the Mayor and Clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw 4236-2020 being a bylaw to set the rates of taxation for the year 2020. Bylaw 4237-2020 being a bylaw to regulate the keeping and maintenance of property within the Town of Pelham, known as the Clean Yards Bylaw. And the third bylaw, 4238 of 2020, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 4068-2019, confirming various appointments to boards, commissions, and committees of the Town of Pelham, and to appoint the council representative to the Meridian Community Beautification Committee, the council representative for the Hospitality Committee, the council representative to the Cannabis Control Committee, and the council representative to the Meridian Community Center User Group Committee. I'll turn it to you for discussion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any discussion on any of the items read out by the clerk? And Councillor Wink.
So the the last one, number 4, there was an omission on there. You outlined all the new representatives on each of the committees, but Councillor Stewart was not shown as part of the new committee and the naming of all the individuals that are on there right now.
Councillor Stewart is for the user group committee?
Yes, and on the schedule, you don't have the user group committee.
Schedule S? Oh. Okay, well, we will take that as an amendment.
You've got 3 committees showing. There should be 4.
Okay, we will take that as an amendment. The clerk does have the authority to make that amendment. So we will take that one as amended, if that's acceptable to council.
Yep, that's fine.
Yep.
Is there any further discussion through you, Mr. Mayor?
I don't see any.
Okay, so I will call the vote. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand? Councillor Hildebrand? Oh, your mic is off.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
And the vote carries as amended on that 3rd bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Now's your motion to go in closed session.
No, you know what? I'm going to, I want 5 minutes. I mean, when I want to have a 5-minute recess.
Oh, we'll go into closed session and then we'll come back in 5 minutes.
Okay. So, clerk has a motion.
Members of council, the next item on your agenda is the resolution to move into closed session. I have a motion by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider a matter under Section 239(2) and 239(3) of the Municipal Act as follows. Under Section 239(2), B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal employees. And D, labor relations or employee negotiations and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And under Section 239(3), an ongoing investigation respecting the municipality by the Ombudsman appointed under the Ombudsman Act, an Ombudsman referred to in subsection 223.13.1 of the Municipal Act, one item. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll call the vote.
Okay, go ahead.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries. We will now convene in closed session. The mayor has called a 5-minute recess.
Yeah, 5-minute recess. I'm sorry, Chief CEO. Oh, CEO.
Can we do a motion to extend the time before we go into close? So that the world know, I mean, there's no way we're getting these 3 items done by 9 p.m. with or without a 5-minute recess.
Right, okay, good point. Yep.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion for that the rules of procedure as contained in the Town of Pelham's procedural bylaw be suspended and that the meeting curfew of 9 o'clock be and is hereby waived and that the remainder of the business listed on the agenda for this meeting continue to be considered until all matters have concluded. I will need a mover and a seconder.
Moved by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hahn.
And I will call the vote. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Okay. And now we have a 5-minute recess.
David, it's Bob Limburner. Are we required to stay on this or?
No. Well, I say that, and in the closed session, I expect Ms. Van